Hello and welcome to Anywhere and Anything Else. This is going to be our second video in the Harry Potter Rewind series. Thanks for joining us if you're new, and thanks for coming back if you saw the previous video. Just a quick rundown. I've read all the Harry Potter books. I've seen all the movies. I've not reread them since I put down the 7th book when it was originally released. And I'm going to be revisiting them now, going through, sharing my thoughts, analysis. Not really an analysis, that sounds a bit too serious. Yeah, we're just going to be sharing some thoughts on the books now, reading them as an adult. Yeah, last video we covered chapters 1 and 2, and be going into 3 and 4 here. I apologize for the lighting. I lost the daylight a lot sooner than I thought I would today. It's super overcast, so I've had to make do with some interior lighting. I'm not very good at that yet. So anyways, let's get on with it. Chapter 3 here, we have Letters from No One. It's a good chapter. Here's where everything sort of begins for Harry. I believe we meet Hagrid in this chapter, or maybe at the very end. Not quite. He's the next chapter. So for this chapter, we're getting into, I suppose we're well into the summer holidays now. Dudley is preparing for his new school. How much of a nerd do you have to be wearing your like new uniform around the house during the summer? I don't know if he's wearing the full uniform, but he's at least carrying around that stupid stick and hitting people with it. Still, like, save it for fall. You'll get there soon enough. Petunia is dyeing Harry's new school uniform gray, or what's supposed to pass as his new school uniform. I think we saw a bit of that in the film. Or maybe that was like a deleted scene or something. I don't know. But as they're having breakfast one morning, Harry is sent to retrieve the mail. He collects the mail and picks up a letter that is addressed to him. Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Private Drive, Little Whinging, I don't know, Surrey. Now, I don't know what possessed Harry to take that letter back into the kitchen with him. Surely he could have slipped it into the cupboard under the stairs before making his way back into the kitchen. I don't know. He's also a little bit. I wonder if it wasn't a letter from Hogwarts, would they have let him keep it, or would they have chastised him at all about the letter? But of course, it's from Hogwarts, and Brennan sort of assesses that out pretty quickly and takes the letter from him. Vernon sort of kicks Harry and Dudley out of the kitchen while he and Petunia discuss what to do about this letter that's arrived at their front door. And it says here, Harry and Dudley had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. I just thought that was interesting because later on in, the 5th book, we have the Weasley twins creating that little device to be able to eavesdrop on people. So I thought that was, not that that's a reference to anything, but I just thought it was interesting. One of the things Aunt Petunia seems worried about is, she says, how could they possibly know where he sleeps? And clearly, the Dursleys are worried about this because almost immediately they move Harry out of the cupboard and into Dudley's spare bedroom, which is basically his toy storage room, I guess. And it kind of makes you think, would it not have been easy for either the school or just Dumbledore himself or the Ministry of Magic to send the Dursleys a letter, like every, I don't know, every month, every 3 or 4 months, just saying, hey, how are you doing? Thanks for taking care of the wizard in your household, and let us know if you need anything like that. Let us know if you need anything, just something like that. Like, I feel like that would have been an easy, a very simple way, just like to keep them on their toes, and maybe Harry wouldn't have been treated so badly. Yeah, because there's no way they didn't know. The other thing that I'm curious of is the letters that are arriving at Harry's, or that are arriving at the Dursleys' home. Is someone writing these, or is it more like a wizard AI kind of thing, where it's like, okay, Harry Potter needs to get this letter, and the address just sort of self generates to wherever he is. Because if not, then somebody knows how he's been living and how he's being treated, and they haven't done anything about it for 10 years. That kind of sucks. So we move Harry over to Dudley's room. At one point in this chapter, when Vernon's trying to sort of get rid of Harry, he means to like send him off to his room. He says, "Go to your cupboard." Such a strange thing to say to a kid. Like, does that not sound odd to you? Why would that be the living arrangement? Okay, so this chapter has been one that I've been interested to get to. I know a lot of some of the things that go on with them trying to deliver this letter to Harry kind of gets lost on the cutting room floor for the films. I believe I have seen some deleted scenes with the letters coming out of the eggs and whatnot. But as a kid, and even now as an adult, whenever I watch this section of the movie, I always remember quite clearly that there was more to them sort of trying to evade and get rid of and get away from the letters. I couldn't remember exactly what and where they went. I remember that they went to other places other than the little shack on the sea. But I don't know, I guess I actually thought they went to more places, but it seems they stopped at one hotel. But JKR does a pretty good job of describing how miserable the journey was. Vernon seemed to just be driving up and down the countryside as if he could sort of shake a tail or something like that. But yeah, so they eventually end up at a rather rundown hotel. And for all you Brits out there, so I've heard of some things that you guys I've heard of some things like your like beans on toast and stuff like that you guys love and are so proud of, that are obviously weird. But I was just curious about this. The breakfast described at the hotel says they ate stale cornflakes and cold tinned tomatoes for breakfast. Now, I can't tell from this sentence. Is the problem with the cold tinned tomatoes on toast the fact that it's cold? Like, is tomatoes on toast a thing? Doesn't sound right. Let me know. But yeah, while they're there, Harry again receives a letter, very specifically addressed to room 17 at the Railview Hotel in Cokeworth. And they have to leave again. Actually, before they leave, before that, Petunia says to Vernon, wouldn't it be better just to go home, dear? Wouldn't it be better just to go home, dear? That's an interesting line to me, because on the one hand, everyone's sort of fed up with Vernon's antics and determination to get away from the letters. But also, I think there's a hint of resignation in Petunia's request, and I get the feeling that she she understands. I'm probably reading into this, but I get the feeling that she understands this a little more than Vernon does. She being the one who had a witch for a sister. Um, I think she understands that the jig is up, so to speak. It's over. Harry's gonna go to Hogwarts, or at the very least, he's gonna get this letter. And Vernon still thinks he can outwit or outsmart whatever this is. Dudley's still upset because he's missing his TV shows. Um, After driving for ages, they get to the shack. They're freezing cold. They can't start a fire. There's no, I guess, kindling. Um, they go to bed, and Harry's sort of counting down the seconds to his birthday. And I thought I would have more to say about that chapter, but that's all right. Yeah, I think I enjoyed just sort of seeing, or the descriptiveness of the family's frustration. Um, they're just ready to call it a day. Vernon's really the only one who's still determined to get away from the letters, to make sure that Harry doesn't get one of the letters. And I think Petunia pretty much understands it's over at this point. Which is funny because I imagine Vernon wouldn't know much or really anything about magic had it not been for Petunia telling him, and really all his. Because I would imagine you teach your in-laws. I would imagine you teach your spouse how to treat your in-laws, right? So I imagine everything that Petunia has said to Vernon about her sister and her husband. His attitude towards them is solely on Petunia. She's taught him to behave this way about them, to perceive them this way. Well, I guess even Marge is a bit weird, so maybe Vernon has something about the abnormal and has an aversion to abnormal on his own. But I think that definitely would have been heightened by the sort of things that Petunia has said to him about her sister and her husband. But I just think it is funny that she gives in first and he's kind of still going. And everyone's ready to go home, but I think she knows it's over by that point. But yeah, Harry and Dudley. I feel like this chapter is the most that they've ever felt like cousins or family. There's a lot of them. It feels like Vernon and Petunia to an extent, but mostly Vernon is too preoccupied with getting away from all the funny business that he's forgotten to treat them differently. So he's kind of annoyed with Dudley as well. He shoos him out of the kitchen. He forces Dudley to give up one of his rooms for Harry. He sort of drags him out of the house when he's taking too long to pack what were meant to be his most essential things. He's trying to pack a TV or something like that. Forces him out of the house. Dudley gets driven up and down the country, and no one seems to be paying him any attention when he complains about not getting to watch his TV shows or being hungry or whatever. He shares a room with Harry, I think twice. First, he shares a room with Harry at the hotel, and then again at the shack. Well, no, I think there's probably just one room total. There's the front room and then the room in the back where everyone's sleeping, and Harry's on the floor and Dudley's on the couch. But yeah, there are moments that kind of, I don't know, in the quiet when Harry's laying awake while Dudley's sleeping. It feels like those are the most that they've ever been. Almost those are the closest they've ever been as cousins, which is weird. Anyway, we can move on to chapter 4 now, I think. Okay. Chapter 4. What a good one this is. Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. Yeah, this was interesting. The illustration for this chapter brought back quite some memories. I haven't looked at any of these in so long. It was cool to see that again. It just felt like just triggered, like opened up some really old files, like recesses in my memory. So, yeah. Let's get on with it. So Harry hears a loud boom. Well, I guess everyone does. Everyone's awake now. And Hagrid comes. The author has here that Vernon comes in holding a rifle in his hands. Who exactly does Vernon think he's dealing with? Like, I don't know. I wonder how estranged Petunia and Lily were. Like, did Vernon ever meet Lily and James? Did he ever see magic being performed prior to Harry coming to live with them? Because he seems to underestimate the wizarding world. I think he knows that. It feels like he knows what his wife has told him, and he just thinks these are weird people. Because a lot of the efforts that he's taken to evade them are obviously futile, but he keeps at it anyways. Just an interesting thought. Like, were they at Lily and James's wedding? Were Lily and James, or at least Lily, at their wedding? Did they come to visit when Dudley was born? Because that would have been not too long before Harry was born. I don't know. Yeah, we don't really know anything about what that dynamic of that foursome would have been. Interesting. Right, so Hagrid comes barging in. Right, so we have a giant that comes barging in, and we get the famous line, you look like your dad, but you've got your mom's eyes. That's just gonna keep coming back over and over. I don't think I knew that was in the first book either. Does anyone say it in the movie? If anyone does, it would have been maybe Dumbledore. Either when they're in front of the mirror of Erised, or perhaps in the hospital wing with Harry at the end of the film. I don't remember it specifically though. Interesting that he mistakes Dudley for Harry at the beginning. I guess they keep saying that Harry looks so much like his father, so there wouldn't have been a familial resemblance there with Dudley. Because if Dudley had any, it would be on the mom's side. Anyways, he doesn't know what Harry looks like. Probably didn't notice a scar or lack thereof. Anyway, says happy birthday, hands him a cake. A cake that he pulls out of his pocket. I have a vague memory of reading through, like, Harry, of reading through this giant pulling things out of his pocket as a kid. I remember that just felt like fantastical in itself. Never mind what else is about to ensue in the rest of this book and the others. In the rest of this book and the others. But he pulls out the cake. It says "Happy Birthday, Harry" on it. Unlike the film, there's no spelling error noted here in the book. I thought that was interesting. And he goes on to introduce himself. Rubius Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. I think Robbie Coltrane delivers that line incredibly. It just sits with you. It's one of those that you quote for no good reason in your head out loud. It's a very well delivered line, and very well presented in the film as well.
Who are you?
Rubius Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts.
But yeah, I really noted the lack of an error in the "Happy Birthday, Harry" that's written on the cake, because Hagrid's sometimes, well, I don't know. I'd have to see more of how he's portrayed in the book, but sometimes he can sort of come off a little bit too much like an oaf, like an idiot, and he's not, is he? I mean, Dumbledore trusts him. He trusts him with a lot. He trusted him to go pick up Harry from the wreckage of his parents' house. He's obviously not useless. I don't think anyone thinks he's useless, but sometimes he can be treated a little bit too much like. I think it happens in children's content where, in order for the kids to seem more, I don't know, brave, courageous, intelligent, there has to be an adult, if not all the adults, but at least an adult who is sort of either at their level, or I don't know how to say, someone for them to be not necessarily better than, but a little bit smarter than, more clever than, maybe. I think that would be the term. Yeah, this scene here is a lot longer than I remember. Never mind what's in the movies. A lot of it's cut out, but at the most, I would say from my memory. I think what I do appreciate though is what I do appreciate about the scene is how long it takes Hagrid to come out with telling Harry exactly what he is. Because you as the reader, you're waiting for it as well. I don't know if I knew exactly what the book was about when I started reading it as a kid. I think that's a very difficult thing, isn't it? It's not the same. Like I could go into a film blind or a TV show blind. I think reading a book is a bit too much of an investment to not know what's going on in the book. Like I don't think I would ever start a book without having some idea of what the book's about. But even still, you're like, you feel the sort of, is it anxiety or stress that Harry's feeling? He's been trying to get a hold of these letters that have been being sent to him for ages, and finally someone comes to not only hand deliver, but also someone that has someone who has a lot of knowledge on their own, who can tell him a lot, and he's taking forever to tell him what's going on, and he's constantly getting interrupted by Uncle Vernon butting in. Also, while I knew Hagrid's name was Rubius, but my first thought while I was reading this is that nobody calls him Rubius. Like I feel like I hear more people say. I feel like I heard Dumbledore's full name more often than Hagrid's full name. And it's interesting that all the kids, everyone, both kids and adults, refer to him as Hagrid as well. But then on the very next page, he says, "Call me Hagrid." Everyone does. So I guess that's why no one calls him Rubius if he prefers Hagrid. But it's interesting. There's no one. Well, that will be an interesting thing to look out for. If at any point in the books someone refers to him simply as Rubius. It'll be interesting to see in what context as well. Yeah, it's interesting to see in this chapter as well. Vernon really seems to think that he can keep Harry from going to Hogwarts, or that he could stop any of the wizards from doing anything. He really can't. I don't know where he gets his confidence from. Hagrid doesn't even need magic to win a fight with Vernon, so I don't know where he was going with that. But yeah, we get the famous line. Well, actually, it's different here. It says, "Harry, you're a wizard." Again, I think Robbie Coltrane did an absolutely fabulous job delivering that line. You're a wizard, Harry.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I mean, it's just that good. Hagrid hands Harry a letter, his letter, finally. And it's addressed, Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. Again, I feel like there's some sort of like wizard AI that's like addressing letters like moments before receipt by the addressee. But yeah, I had forgotten, like all through, even from the last chapter, Letters from No One, the Letters from No One, I'd kind of forgotten sort of the way the book is laid out in print. It's a really nice touch that they sort of break up the usual print whenever there's like something specific. So a letter from, so like for instance, these letters, every time we read sort of the address on one of the letters, it's sort of written in, the font kind of looks like someone scrawled on a piece of paper, sort of. And now with this official sort of admissions letter from Hogwarts, it does look like a formal printed letter that you would get from a school. I don't know. It's just it's a nice touch to break up the monotony, I think. And this one reads, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confederacy of Wizards, I think. Or is it Confederation? International Confederation of Wizards. Either way. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than January the 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Very interesting there. First of all, what happens if you don't reply? It's interesting that the letter comes from McGonagall as Deputy Headmistress. I guess she's sort of in charge of this aspect, making sure all the new youngsters get their admissions letter. But it lists Dumbledore as headmaster. Is that like a usual thing in schools or British schools? Is that like a sort of an accolade for the school to have a certain headmaster? Like it's a way of touting the school's accreditations, so to speak. And that's interesting. But there's also like a list of honorifics here for Dumbledore that, other than Order of Merlin, I don't think I've heard any of these others. I don't know if they're ever mentioned, if there's any reference to them in the rest of the books. That's interesting, if they just sort of like dropped off, or if anyone ever mentions anything about them again. But yeah, it makes sense that Dumbledore would have a bunch of awards and things like that. It's not really something that gets talked about later on, or at least not to my memory. So Harry reads his letter, and he's sort of just taking it all in. And in the meantime, Hagrid writes back to Dumbledore, letting him know that he's found Harry and given him the letter. Interesting that in his letter back to Dumbledore, to It's very short. It's almost more like a telegram. But he includes that the weather's horrible, as if, I don't know how much Dumbledore would care, but never know. But he writes this letter and gives it to an owl, which he pulled out of his coat pocket, and then proceeds to throw the owl out into the storm. Poor bird. You'd think he'd wait till morning or something. Brennan's still insisting that Harry's not going. Harry hears the term Muggle for the first time. Another thing I found interesting about the letter from Hogwarts. So it says they need the letter by no later than the 31st. Imagine if Harry had grown up knowing that he's a wizard, like the Dursleys had told him, and he'd done some research and decided that he wanted to go to like Durmstrang or something like that, and he finally gets this letter from Hogwarts at 11 years old and writes back, no thanks. Or if he just doesn't want to learn magic at all. I mean, maybe he could have thought that's what got his parents killed, so I'm not going back there. Would they have come and taken him forcibly? And by forcibly, I mean convincing, I guess. Petunia finally gets to speak her mind. She finally gets to like let loose and tell Harry exactly what she thinks of him and his mother and father. Seems like she's been holding that back for quite a while. Much of the rest of this chapter proceeds just like in the movie. Hagrid tells Harry about how his parents really died, a little bit about Voldemort. He says Lily and James were head boy and head girl at some point during their time at Hogwarts. Can't remember if I knew that or not, or if I remembered that. I think I do remember knowing that. James must have had like an interesting 7 years at Hogwarts. It feels like he not that he really grew up. I'm sure he did, but he seemed to go through an arc. From what we've gotten on his parents, they seem to be lovely people. But I imagine imagine he had a nice like childhood and upbringing, and then got into a bit of mischief as he got a little bit older, and then sort of like grew out of that as well. Like him meeting Sirius must have been. Sirius talks about meeting James like it's the thing that saved his life. But I imagine some of Sirius's mischievousness and recklessness rubbing off on James a little bit, and maybe sort of needing to balance that out, to sort of calibrate. So I imagine him going far towards Sirius's end and being more like Sirius, and then eventually like calming down a bit and going back to like sort of his roots, from the way he grew up. I don't know. That's just my head canon. One of the things Hagrid mentions is that Dumbledore had sort of warned him that there might be trouble getting a hold of Harry, which I think is quite interesting. It seems like Dumbledore has known a little bit more about what's been going on with Harry at the Dursleys, and I don't see why he didn't intervene. He really should have. Couldn't have hurt that much. He also mentions that Lily and James were killed on Halloween. That's something that I did not remember. It also doesn't seem to be very significant to the story. Like, I think you're telling a story about witches and wizards. Halloween seems like it would be a significant date, and I think it tends to be in some other stories. But really, it's an interesting mention here because it goes on not to be. Like, I think in the rest of the film, I think in the rest of the stories, there's never anything really specific. There's never really anything significant about Halloween coming and going at Hogwarts or in the Wizarding World in general. At least not that I can remember right now. It almost feels like mentioning Halloween in a story about witches and wizards is kind of cliche, and the author's done it here, but then goes on to like flesh out her story, and it just becomes like Halloween becomes like a non-issue in the rest of the series. I think Hagrid had mentioned some families that Voldemort had killed. The McKinnons, the Boneses, the Pruitts. Is that the same as Susan Bones's family? In which case, what branch of her family or what people were killed? Because obviously Susan's still born. Just something I was curious about. He also mentions that when the Dark Lord fell, a lot of people who were on his side came back to the good side, so to speak. And he says some of them came out of kind of trances. And I wonder what he means by that. I know a lot of people would have claimed to have been forced or have done things to have been forced to have done things against their own will. But what Hagrid says, some of them came out of trances. The only thing I can think of is like the Imperius Curse. But my understanding of the Imperius Curse is that it's very it's like a very direct sort of in the moment thing. I don't think it's like a long-term curse that you can put on someone, right? Like you can't like use the Imperius Curse on someone and then like send them off to run some errands for you or something. Like I don't know what's the range on that. How long does it last? But there's probably other things, potions and things like that you can use to control people. So definitely possible. I just don't know of anything specifically. And if you do, feel free to let me know. Leave a comment down there. He also very interestingly, Hagrid also very interestingly mentions that Harry's name has been down to go to Hogwarts ever since he was born. What exactly does that mean? Is that just the idea that once a wizard or someone with magical potential is born, there's like a registry of names somewhere, just like automatically, just to make sure that they get a letter sent out to everyone? Or are they saying that Hogwarts is such a prestigious school that a wizarding family like the Potters would, as soon as their child was born, literally register their kid up for school to make sure that they can go to Hogwarts when the time is right? Is that what we're talking about? Like a really fancy prep school? Also, was Dumbledore headmaster at Hogwarts on the night that Lily and James died? That's something I'm not sure of. I don't think I've ever had clarification on that. He might have been teaching there. He was teaching when Voldemort was at school. But was he teaching all of that time? Until through Lily and James's years? And until Harry got there? Because like when did he go out and do his like great deeds, the things that people admire him for? I don't know. And we get to this section here where Vernon insults Dumbledore, calls him a crackpot old fool, and Hagrid sort of threatens him. I don't know, I just like the way it's written here. The words are very similar to the movie where Hagrid says, "Never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me," but the way that the author describes his actions is a lot different. I believe Robbie Coltrane's kind of like pointing his umbrella at Vernon, but it's described here in the book that Hagrid is sort of like whirling the umbrella overhead. Something about that just seems a little bit more epic. I don't know, in a way. Like I can imagine him doing that, and then I don't know. It just seems like you're mustering some like power, and that just seems a little bit more intimidating. I don't know. Hagrid also tells Harry here that he was expelled from school, and I wonder how much JKR knew about Hagrid's character at this point. Was that was that meant to have any meaning other than just to give Hagrid some character? You know, like not everyone goes to school, not everyone finishes school, um, but everyone sort of makes their way in the world. Um, or did she know where she was going with Hagrid already at this point? And if so, why would she see? Why did she feel the need to mention this aspect of his past at this point in the series, in the 4th chapter of the first book? I don't know. But it also gives Harry a bit more of a connection with Hagrid, because Hagrid asks or tells Harry that he'd appreciate it if he didn't mention the fact that he had just given Dudley a pig's tail, because he wasn't supposed to be using magic, and it kind of gives like I don't know if Harry's ever had to keep someone's secret before. It's not that serious of a secret, I think. I mean, he could get in trouble, but he's probably not going to. I don't know, but it just gives Harry something to bond with Hagrid over, regardless of how minute. Yeah, I just thought that was an interesting aspect. Yeah, I don't think Harry has had that sort of a relationship with anyone. And this guy is weird as heck, coming and telling him that he's a wizard and doing magic. He's known him for less than an hour, possibly at this point, maybe 2, and already he's entrusted him with some information, a secret, something that could get him in trouble. Harry even asks, "Why were you expelled?" And Hagrid kind of brushes it off and says, "They have to be up early tomorrow." I wonder, did she know at this point why Hagrid was expelled? Why mention it at all? I guess that's just a good way of like portraying Harry. He's just a curious kid. Yeah. Hagrid hands him his coat to sleep under and mentions that there's probably dormice roaming around the pockets. That's a no from me. But yeah, that's the end of chapter 4. The Keeper of the Keys, Rubeus Hagrid. It's pretty cool that he kind of gets. It's almost his chapter to star in. Hagrid's chapter to star in, even though we had met him earlier briefly in the first chapter alongside Dumbledore and McGonagall. So chapter 4 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Yeah, still don't have an ending for these videos, but thanks so much for watching up to this point. If you haven't seen the first video, please go check it out. And if you have, thanks for coming back. See you in the next one.